Hi, I'm Izzy at Izoso Studio. I am the designer and creator of the Rydal jumpsuit, and it's my privilege today to talk you through the pattern and then show you how to sew it. This video sort of works in conjunction with the sewing instruction booklet. So all the information that I'll be talking you through today is also in the booklet, but we understand that everyone learns differently, which is why we've created this free sew along for you so that we can support you in your sewing journey. The idea of this jumpsuit pattern design actually came about as a result of a collaboration and just a conversation really that I had with a style and image consultant. We were talking about styles that complement a lot of different body shapes, and I was trying to think of something that would really be useful and helpful for our sewing community in terms of pattern, shape and sort of structure. So this is the one that we came up with together and I absolutely love it. This jumpsuit is so comfy. I'm sure you guys are going to love it at home when you sew it up as well. The Rydal jumpsuit has a really flattering V-neck that fits really snugly around the bust. It also has 3 different sleeve options. This is the 3/4 length, it's got a short one and a long one with a nice big cuff. It also has 3 different leg options, so you can make it into a short version like a play suit, you can do 3/4 length, or you can do a nice full length. Now the trouser leg is a nice wide, elegant, flattering trouser leg. It's nice and wide, really nice and swishy. And the other thing I love about the pattern is it has the option to have pockets. Now we've shown in the booklet that there's a view A, B and C. However, you can mix and match whatever you want. You could do long trousers with the short sleeve and pockets. You can do whatever you want. So just feel free to mix and match as many times as you want this pattern. And that gives you options to recreate the pattern to create completely different looks. We really care about size inclusivity and being inclusive with our pattern design. That's why we've created a booklet and also this video, because we know everyone learns differently. And our size range is from 6 to 34 to be size inclusive. We have tested the pattern across that entire range as well, twice. And we also have 2 different cup sizes for the pattern, a B and a D. Now, your pattern cup size is different to your bra cup size, and it is based on your body measurements and the difference between your high bust and your full bust. So we'll talk you through that in a bit more detail in a few minutes. Now, a lovely inclusive feature that we've incorporated into this jumpsuit is to do the tie waistband. So it really is flexible throughout the day. I know that people sometimes have bodies that change shape like up to 2 sizes throughout the day. And so we thought it was wise not to put elastic into the casing, but to offer this lovely little drawstring waistband so you can change the drawstring throughout the day as your body shape changes. However, if you would like to do elastic, you are more than welcome to put elastic into the casing. It doesn't change the pattern shape. Cut it out as it is and just pop elastic in there instead of a drawstring. Now, one of the best things about sewing at home is being able to customize your patterns to suit your personal style. So yes, you can swap out the drawstring for elastic. Another thing you could do is just to widen the band here, the neckline, so the collar, the neckband here, and that would just create a bit more of a modest V neckline to your top. You could also do a contrast of colour for your neckband as well, which would give it a really nice modern ping. I love it when it's done like that, and also the drawstring kind of matches in, ties really nicely in terms of colours. And of course you can swap in and out with all the versions, the sleeves and the trouser length and the pockets. In the instruction booklet on page 4, we have a full glossary talking about all the different terminology. I'll be talking you through that today step by step as well. Now, jersey is like stretchy fabric. It's got a nice amount of stretch to it. And the type of fabric that we would recommend is obviously a jersey fabric with stretch. Now, I would recommend that the fabric has at least 40% stretch across widthways. Also helpful to have a little bit of stretch this way as well, so lengthways. And that's simply to accommodate the snug fit around the bodice at the top. We think a nice medium weight jersey works really well, and obviously it depends on which version you are sewing at home as to, you know, what aesthetic you feel you want. Now, when you're sewing with jersey, obviously it's stretchy. We would recommend that you use a lightning bolt stitch on your sewing machine or a small zigzag stitch. This is different to fabrics that don't have any stretch. You can use normal thread as you're sewing with jersey. You can also find stretch thread as well if you prefer to use a stretchy thread. The Gutermann Mariflex thread works really well, and you can use a straight stitch on your sewing machine using that thread. The seam allowance on this pattern is 1.5 centimetres. However, I know a lot of you guys at home just love to sew jersey straight with the overlocker and not with a sewing machine at all. If you do choose to do that, please just make sure that you are sewing and trimming off the seam allowance as you sew rather than just sewing a 5mm seam allowance. We recommend using a ballpoint needle so that it sews really nicely through the jersey and doesn't snag on the fabric. So this pattern has been drafted for an average height of 5'6". So if you are taller or shorter than that, you are going to need to lengthen or shorten your pattern pieces, and where you need to do that is indicated on the pattern pieces. In order to choose your pattern size, you're going to need to take a few body measurements. Let's do that now. First measurement that we want to take is our high bust measurement. So we're going to get the tape measure and wrap it round underneath our armpits and around the front of the body so it's nice and straight at the back. Run 2 fingers in between your body and the tape measure. Take a big breath in, hand out again, and just check that feels comfortable. Next, we're going to do our bust measurement, which is a bit lower. It's around the fullest part of our bust, and it should be in a straight line. Tape measure should be in a straight line all the way around your body. Take a big breath in and out, and just make sure you can fit those 2 fingers between your body and the tape measure again. Now the third one is our waist. So actually on this pattern, the drawstring should sit nicely on your waistband, on your natural waist. And our natural waist can be found if you stand up straight and then you bend, put your hands on around your waist area, bend to one side. You should be able to feel where the little kink is in your body, and the other side, it's between the bottom of your rib cage and your hip bones. So take that measurement, and again you do need to take a nice big breath in and out again, fit 2 fingers between your body. And then finally, our hip measurement is around the widest part of our hips, which for everyone is different. Just make sure you're running the tape measure around the widest part of your hips. Okay, so using the little size chart on page 5, write in the little box your high bust measurement. This is the pattern size you need to cut out for your bodice. Next, calculate the difference between your bust and your high bust and write the difference in that box there. If the difference is between 0 to 8 centimetres, you want to cut pattern cup size B. If the difference is between 8 to 13 centimetres, you want to cut pattern cup size D. Now we have provided 2 pattern cup sizes, but obviously if the difference you've got there for you between your high bust and your bust is more than 13 centimetres, you may well need to do a full bust adjustment. Then just simply write in your measurement for your waist and your hips and work out what size you need to cut. Now, we are not expecting that everyone will just magically fit into one size, so do grade the pattern pieces if you need to. Now, the jumpsuit is designed to be really nice and snug fitting across and around the bust area, but not at the waist or the hips. So it has quite a nice flowing shape all the way down the silhouette of your body, starting with a nice snug fit around the shoulders and top of the bust, and then it's quite nice and loose around the rest of your body. If you've bought the pattern as a PDF from our website, it comes as an AO or A4 PDF. That means that you can send the AOs to your professional printers and just get them printed to scale, which is nice and easy. Or, of course, you can print at home. Now, what we've done and what you'll see on page 8 of the instruction booklet is that we have actually told you exactly which pages you need to print if you are cutting the D cup or the B cup pattern piece. So do take a little note of that little box on the bottom of page 8. That would be really helpful for you. Do make sure that you print your pattern scaled at 100%, otherwise it will be completely off in terms of size. On page 10 of the instruction booklet, we have got some suggested cutting layouts based on size range and fabric width. Now, fabric comes in a range of different sort of widths, but most standard it's 1.5 meters or 1.15 meters. So depending on what width the fabric you bought, obviously the length that you need and the layout that you will find most efficient will vary. So in the booklet, we've suggested a couple of layouts, but feel free to make it more efficient at home if you can find a way to do that. On page 11 of the booklet, we've got a pattern ID piece. So that just really clearly demonstrates which pattern pieces you need to cut out depending on which version you want to sew. Now in this sew along, I've chosen to cut a 3/4 length jumpsuit with short sleeves and pockets. Now I'm going to show you all of those things in the video and how to sew along each of those steps with me today. However, I'm also going to show you how to do sleeve C as well. So we've got everything covered in terms of technically how to sew this gorgeous little jumpsuit. Okay, let's get straight on into it. As you follow along today, in the bottom of the screen there's going to be like a little number, and that demonstrates the step number that we are at. So you can quickly kind of scroll through and scroll back again. Great, let's talk about what you're going to need next to sew your pattern. In order to sew the Rydal jumpsuit, you're going to need your fabric, and you can refer to your size chart and to discern how much fabric you actually need. We recommend a light to medium weight drapey jersey such as the smooth viscose with 4-way stretch that stretches about 40%. So you can download a nice little PDF from our website that shows you how to ascertain the amount of stretch on your jersey fabric. So if you're not sure, download that and print it off and just sort of stretch out your fabric accordingly to see how much the stretch factor is for your fabric. You're obviously then going to need matching thread. Now we recommend that you use ribbing for the neckband, which is this bit coming around here, and also for the cuffs on view C, simply because the ribbing or cuffing has a lot more sort of bounce when it stretches than the actual jersey fabric itself. So it's really helpful to, if you can find some ribbing that coordinates really nicely with your fabric, to use ribbing for your neckband. We've got some lovely versions online where you can see how we've used contrasting ribbing, and it looks really, really nice. However, for this particular fabric, I could not find any ribbing to match, so I'm just going to make my ribbing and my neckline out of this fabric for this demo. We would also recommend that you have some drawstring, and that is literally just little drawstrings down here. This colour works really nicely with my fabric. If you can't find a colour of drawstring that matches your fabric, you could always make your drawstring out of the fabric itself. If you want to make the drawstring out of the main fabric of your jumpsuit, you are going to need to cut a rectangle that is 5 centimetres wide, and then you're going to need to cut the required length of your drawstring. You may need to piece together a few pieces of your fabric. Then you're going to need to turn it together so right sides are together. Sew a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance all the way down that massive long drawstring, turn it right sides out, and then use that as your drawstring. That can look really beautiful. So it is a little bit time consuming, but it does work really nicely, especially if you're struggling to find a drawstring that coordinates really nicely with your pattern on your fabric. You're going to need 2 little eyelets, just like these ones here, and we recommend a width of 5 millimeters. So the gap in the middle is 5 millimeters wide, and that's just so it can accommodate your lovely little drawstring really nicely and snugly. So it just looks like really smart like that. If you don't want to use eyelets, of course, you can, by all means, just do a little buttonhole in your fabric, and that's totally fine. We also recommend interfacing. We've got a little strip here that's 30 millimeters by 80 millimeters or 3 centimeters by 8 centimeters. That's all it is, and it's literally just to go behind the eyelets or behind your buttonhole. Now these two are completely optional. I've got some hemming tape here. This is sticky on both sides, and it's really helpful for just making sure the fabric sort of sits nice and flat and smooth. If you're struggling with your fabric and it's going a little bit bumpy as you sew it, obviously play about with your tension, but sometimes it's really helpful just to have some hemming tape because it's sticky on both sides and you can iron it in place first over the seam you're about to sew, especially with the pockets or the hem, and then it just helps sort of stabilise the fabric as you sew it so it doesn't all bunch up and become even more wavy. I will show you how to do that. And then finally, you may well want to use some elastic instead of your drawstring here. So you've got 2 options for the waistband, and we would recommend elastic that is about 2 centimeters wide, just so it fits in the casing really nicely. I just want to talk you through how to grade the pattern pieces so that you can understand how to do that if you need to do it. So in this demo, I'm going to show you what you need to do if you have a size 16 bust, 18 waist and 20 hips, just so you can see the key points of where you need to grade between on this pattern if that is you. Okay, so if you're a size 16, your bust is hitting underneath the armpit. So at this point, you want to follow the 16 line up here. So this would be your 16 line here. And from this point up, you would be cutting the size 16. Okay, so from the bust area here. And also correspondingly on the neckline over here, you would also be cutting the size 16. Now, the waist is clearly marked here on the pattern piece. So by the time you get down here, if you're cutting a size 18, you want to be cutting along the 18 line by the time you hit the waist, which is down here. So all you need to do is just very simply draw a line from here down to the 18. So you can draw a straight line like that, and then you can just sort of curve it off if you need to. So that's that. It's worth noting that anything from the bust up should be your bust size. So for your sleeve pattern piece up here, you're going to be wanting to follow the 16 or whatever size you cut for your bust in order to ensure that these sections here, the sleeves, are going to fit into the sleeves of the top. Now for the back pattern piece here, again, our bust line, which for this example is a 16, needs to be cut from here on up. And the bust all the way up to the neckline up here. So obviously just straight down there. By the time we hit the waist, again it's nicely annotated here, you'd want to go up a size. So just draw a line between the two. On the neckline pattern piece, I would recommend just going with your bust line and cutting out whatever size your bust is. So in this demo, it would just be the straight size 16. For the pocket pieces, you follow your hip size, and for the cuff view, you're going to follow your bust size, so it'd be a 16 for us here. And then finally, on the trouser piece, pattern piece A, we are at the waist, so we know that this is the waist notch here at this point. We want to be at 18, which is what we graded up to previously. However, by the time we hit the hip, which is down here, 20 centimetres below the waist or 21 centimetres below the waist, we actually want to go up a size to a size 20. So this is the size that we want to cut around the hips. So again, just really simply draw a line between the two and just curve it off if you need to create a nice straight line. And do the same on the other side. So where that double notch is there, that's your hip line. And just grade between the two. And then from the hip line onwards, just follow your hip line all the way down the rest of the trousers. For your eyelet locations, just follow the waist size that you've been using. So that would be, in this scenario, the 18s. And again, for your pocket front size, I would choose the size that matches your waist, which in this scenario is the 18 at this point here. As we sew today, our seam allowance is 1.5 centimetres or 5/8 of an inch. I will be sewing on the sewing machine first, a line of stitches using a lightning bolt stitch, and then I'm going to move on to my overlocker and just finish off the seam really nicely. If you would prefer just to use the overlocker, it's absolutely fine. Just make sure that your inner stitch line is 1.5 centimetres away from the raw edge. So you're going to be trimming off about 1 centimetre of fabric, depending on the width of your overlocker stitch. Okay, so we've got our back pattern piece B, we've got one of those pattern pieces, and then we've got the sleeve patterns E and F. Now, I cannot reiterate how important it is to mark your notches. So what I've done here on the back of the sleeve is I've done like 2 little notches and I've just snipped into the fabric, again up at the top where that notch is. And for the sleeves, I can see the front has got a single notch and the back has got a double notch there. So the curves are slightly different shapes. So what we want to do is very simply pop the back, which in this case is going to be this one here. So what we're going to do is to take one of the sleeves and put the back of the sleeve, the bit with the double notch, over the back bodice and line it up at this point here. And then just pin the underarm seam next and the top of the seam as well. Stitch along that line using your 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Now, once you've sewn that first seam, you may just want to finish it off with an overlocker. So once it's attached and we've overlocked it like that, if you then open it up, we're just going to press that seam allowance towards the sleeve side. Okay, repeat that process for the other sleeve. Okay, in step 3, we're going to attach the bodice front to the shoulders up here. So we're going to attach this side here to the sleeve shoulder seam here. Once again, we've got a little notch here and we've also got a little notch here at that point. And so we should just be able to line those up really nicely and evenly. We're going to pin that one in place and then sew using our 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Okay, so once you've finished sewing one side together, we're going to sew the other side together over here. And then in step 4, it says to finish that seam and then repeat the whole process for the other sleeve. Lovely. Okay, and once you've overlocked both those seams, attaching the bodice to the sleeve, we're just going to press those seams towards the sleeve. In step 5, we're going to be looking at the neckline, which is pattern piece D. We are going to stitch a line of stitches to stitch the two pieces together. So we've got two neckline pieces here, and we're very simply just going to stitch them together and then press the seam open. Lovely. So just like that, we press that little seam open. Step 6 just says, with wrong sides together, fold the neckline D in half along its length and then just press in place. Okay, in step 7, we're going to attach our neckband that we've just folded nice and neatly to the main bit of our body. Now, the neckband has been designed to be shorter than the whole of the body piece because we want the neckband to kind of just hold it all in, and that's the bit that makes it sit nice and smooth against our chest. So we have added some nice little notches along the neckband, and these correspond with the notches along the bodice side here. So I would recommend if you get the center of the neckband up here and line it up with that double notch up there, you'll see that actually you have got a little double notch on the neckband here that you can then just place over the double notch there. Pin or clip that in place. So we're aligning the raw edges together, and that's because when we've sewn it, it's then going to flip over and create a really nice finish. We have our next little notch is quite close, and it's over here. It's going to line up with that sleeve, and you're going to have to stretch it across to match up with that shoulder seam over there. So you're going to have excess of the bodice, and all you need to do is just sort of stretch out both of the fabrics till they're both nice and straight, and then just add a little pin in the middle between those two pins like that. So it's evenly distributing the fabric of the bodice underneath nice and neatly. Okay, so our next notch on the bodice is here, and that aligns with the front shoulder seam. So just pop it over there and pin it in place. And then just repeat that process like what we did at the front. Got quite a lot of excess of the bodice there, so I'm just going to stretch it out. And I might actually add 2 pins into this because there's quite a lot of stretch that we need to do for this section. Okay, so then we've still got a little bit more of neckband, and you can see it's definitely shorter, isn't it, than down here, and that's good. That's what we're expecting. We have got another little central notch here, and that lines up with the center notch on the front here. So let's pin that in place next. And once again, just stretch out the neckband to match the length of the bodice, and just pop a few pins in place. Okay, and then finally we've got one more notch down here right at the very end, and that actually lines up with this notch here. Now what you'll notice down here is that the end of the neckband down here is not meeting up with the end of the bodice pattern piece, which is down here, yeah? And that's okay, that's exactly how it's been designed because it meets at the 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. So just trust me on this one, that's how it's designed to be. Okay, so then the final thing just to do on this side is again just stretch the neckband so that it matches the length of the bodice and just pop a few pins in place. It's really worth taking your time doing this. Excellent. So once you've pinned one side in place, just repeat the exact same process for the other side. Now it's really important as we're doing this neckband that we're really carefully lining up the raw edges, and as we sew, we're sewing really accurately because if we don't do that, then we're going to get a neckband that kind of wobbles in width as we wear it once it's sewn. So we just want to get this bit really nice and accurate. If there's one bit you want to focus on accuracy, I'd say it's probably this bit, and if you're doing the pockets, the pockets. Step 8. Okay, great. Now we've pinned it in place, let's just sew using our 1.5cm seam allowance. So my top tip for sewing the neckband is very simply to flip it over and sew with the bodice side facing up on your machine. What this does is it means you can really clearly check that your bodice is being stretched to the length of the neckband and you've not got any tucks, any accidental tucks anywhere, which is really important. Brilliant. Once you've sewn it all together, just overlock the raw edge so it's nice and neat. In step 9, we're going to sew the top of the bodice together. So we're basically going to overlap it and like baste it in place. We need to make sure that we get this the right way round. So the right hand side of our body should be crossing over and on top of the left hand side of our body. So the right hand side is the right hand side as you wear the garment. So follow the picture in the instruction booklet and you'll get it the right way round. Okay, so this is my left side as I wear the garment and this is my right side. This is the side that's going to go on top of the left. However, we have got some really helpful little notches. We've got one here and one here. This is actually our centre front notch and it aligns with the centre front notch over here on this side. So pick up the pattern piece and just lay those two centre front notches over, and what you'll notice is the end of the neckband should be touching the other little notch on this side. You shouldn't need to stretch the fabric at all, it should just be able to lay on top of itself really nice and simply. So pop that in place and just pin that waist seam together. On the other side, on the underside over here, the other notch at the bodice should line up with the end of the neckband at that point too. You can see why all these little notches are really important, can't you? Brilliant. We're now just going to baste that in place. I would suggest using a little zigzag stitch just within the seam allowance. So sew the zigzags about 5mm, half a centimetre away from the raw edge. Okay, and then that is step 10 complete. So then, with right sides together, we are just going to fold the front over the back, and then we're going to pin and then sew and finish the side seams. Now we do have a couple of little notches which are really helpful along the side seam, and if you are sewing the D cup pattern piece, you're going to want to stretch your back bodice pattern piece so that the two notches align along the side seam. And that's simply just to give more volume for the D cup. Let's sew that using our 1.5cm seam allowance. Finish that seam however you'd like to. And once you've completed and finished that side seam, just repeat it for the other side. Now at this point, steps 13 to 18 are all about doing the pockets, which I'm about to show you now. If you have chosen not to do the pockets, of course, feel free just to skip forward until we start doing the legs, which is step 19. Okay, so we've got the two little pockets right here, and I'm just going to pop them side by side, and I'm actually going to do them both at the same time. First thing we want to do is just fold this raw edge over by 1 centimetre and press it. So grab a tape measure and just measure that out and then press it in place. Next, we want to turn it again by itself again by 2.5 centimetres and just press that in place again. Now at this point you may find it helpful just to have some hemming web. What I have found is I'm just going to grab a bit like that and rip it off, And because it's got glue on either side, I'm just going to unfold it and pop it right underneath here. What I have found is that this just helps the stitches just to stay nice and straight when you're doing this top bit here. Make sure you haven't got any little bits that just stick out, because they will go straight onto your iron. Okay, great. So just press that in place again, just to heat up that glue so it stays nice and firm for you as you sew it. Okay, so we're just going to top stitch it now, 2 centimeters away from the folded edge, which is just going to make sure that stays down nice and firm at all times. Now, when you're top stitching, you can either do a slightly longer stretch stitch. So if you're doing your zigzags, a little bit longer, keep them nice and narrow though still, because that's nice, or a longer lightning bolt stitch, which is what I'm going to do. Or you can use a twin needle to run a nice run of stitches all the way along there. It's completely up to you. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is just turn under the rest of the seams by 1.5 centimeters. Don't forget to also do the little corners. Now again, you can choose to use your hemming tape if you'd like to. I do tend to find it makes it just a little bit neater if you do. Brilliant, and once you've done that for one pocket, just repeat the same process for the other. Great, we're now going to pop these little gorgeous little pockets onto our trouser leg. So we're going to do that together now. You will need to have transferred your pocket location markings onto your trouser leg. So for me, what I've done here is I've just sort of done a few little tacking pieces of cotton, which just show where the angle of the pocket needs to sit and where the top of it needs to sit like that. So all I'm going to do is just lay my pocket on top of my trouser leg, making sure that everything's really nice and flat. And I'm just going to pin it together. Now the critical thing here is just keeping it as flat as possible, making sure that we're not getting any little ridges or anything like that underneath the pocket. So step 17 says to run a line of stitches all the way around the perimeter except for this bit, which is obviously the bit we want to put our hands into when we wear the garment. This is the centre front of the trousers. So what we're going to do is to run our first line of stitches all the way around, keeping it 3 millimeters from the folded edge. Once we've done one line of stitches, we're then going to repeat the process and do another line of stitches, and that line will be 8 millimeters offset from the folded edge. What that means is we're basically going to get a set of tram lines of stitches going all the way down and around the pocket, really nice and secure and really nice and neat. What I would suggest is definitely up at the top up here and down here where you start and then where you finish, just make sure you reinforce the stitches at those locations, because obviously those points are going to take quite a lot of tension as your hand goes into your pocket. Lovely, so it should look something like that. Then just repeat the process of sewing the other pocket onto the other trouser front leg. Great, let's move on now to look at sewing our trousers together, which is step 19. With right sides together, pin the inner leg seam of the trouser leg together and then stitch in place. As you're pinning, don't forget that you've got a nice little notch there to help you, because jersey fabric does stretch quite a lot, doesn't it? So it's just nice to have a couple of references as you sew this really long line of stitches. Great, once you've sewn that seam in place, just finish it however you want and then just repeat for the other trouser leg. Okay, moving on to step 21, with right sides together we're going to put one trouser leg into the other trouser leg. So you can see we've got two sort of mirror images of trouser legs. This is the back with the double notch here and the same here. What we want to do is to attach the centre front together like that, and also attach the centre back together. So let's turn this one right side out. Just like that, and then we're literally just going to put this one into the other trouser leg. Just feed it all the way through, and just make sure that your inner crotch seam is matching up as you do this. So once you've got your inner crotch seam lined up beautifully, just pin that in place so you've got a nice little reference and it's not going to move or shift around too much. Okay, great. And then along this curve here, we can see we've got our double notch there, and the waist should match up at the top. I mean, these should match up absolutely perfectly because this is, you know, just exactly the same on each side. So just pop a couple of pins in there, lining up that notch and the waist up at the top. Brilliant. Then we're just going to flip it all over so that we've got the other side facing us, which will be the centre front. We just want to pin the centre front together now. So I'm going to get the waistband up here together. Great. So effectively what we've got here now is the entire centre front all pinned together. The inner crotch seam is pinned together, and then the centre back is also pinned together. So we're just going to give that a nice sew, 1.5 centimetre seam allowance, and then finish it as you want. Excellent, so there we have it. We've done all of that. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is attach the bodice to the trousers. So turn the bodice inside out, and the front of the trousers is facing up on the screen. The front of the bodice is also facing up on the screen. What we're going to do is just to feed the trousers into the inside of the bodice nice and carefully, and then just stretch out the trousers so that the side seams, so that everything's all nice and flat as much as you can. So for the purpose of this video, I've just popped a little piece of white paper underneath and in between the trousers. So imagine this is where your legs are, effectively, between the trousers. Okay, so we've got the front trouser leg there, we've got the bodice here, and we want to find the centre notch. So the centre front notch was right here on the bodice. I'm going to line that first up with the centre front seam of the trouser leg. And just pop a little pin in place to hold those 3 pieces of fabric together. Then if you work your way along the trouser leg, you'll find the next notch over here, and that should line up with the bodice notch where the neckband sits and aligns and hits the bottom of the bodice. So again, just pin those 2 bits of fabric together at that point. Now you'll notice that the trousers are a little bit wider than the bodice, and that's totally fine. They've been designed to be like that. So just stretch out the bodice so that they match the length of the trousers and just pin in place. Okay, just repeat for the other side, finding that little notch to start off with. Okay, so basically we've got the majority of the front done. Let's flip the trousers over so that we've got the back next, facing up. Okay, so on the back we've got a nice little centre back seam right here, and on the bodice we've got like a double notch where the centre back is on the bodice, so you can start to line those 2 things up to start off with. Now the rest of it just needs to be eased in and stretched into place. Brilliant. Once you've got all of that all pinned in place nicely, we're just going to sew it. But this time we're going to sew it with a 3 centimetre seam allowance. And that's because this strip of fabric will then fold down to create the casing for our drawstring or elastic if that's what you want to choose. So 3 centimetre seam allowance from the raw edge. Once you've sewn those 2 pieces together, we're then just going to finish the edges together. So of the trousers and the top, just finish the raw edges together. Make sure that you don't trim off loads if you're using an overlocker. Just trim off the bare minimum, 1 or 2 millimetres maximum, as you trim off that raw edge to create a nice neat finish. Brilliant. Okay, so we've sewn that all together. It's looking really good now. It's almost there, isn't it? We just got this little casing to do down here. So what I'd like you to do now is just to check that you're happy with the placement of the eyelets or the buttonholes at this point. Now they should be coming down and matching sort of in line with where the neckband would continue down onto the trousers. Now the placement on the pattern pieces is correct, so it should line up beautifully just like that. I've not done anything special, it's just lined up like that for me, because that's the way the pattern piece is designed. However, what can happen with jersey is that things can slip and shift around as you sew them. I fully understand that, so please just review the location of your eyelets or your buttonholes before you commit to them and put holes in them. That's why we've done the pattern in this stage. You could always have done them earlier, but I always worry that your fabric is going to slip as you sew it, and then you're going to end up with like buttonholes that are like way too far to the left or to the right. So that's why we've left this stage till now. I've just pulled the waistband casing up and pointed it up towards the bodice, and that's revealed the location of where the little eyelets need to go or where your buttonholes need to go. So we want to apply our little bit of interfacing just right over that whole area. You could trim it down a little bit if you want to, it just needs to extend up to the stitch line. So just pop your interfacing over that area and just put a nice hot iron on top. Now, don't forget that there should be no steam when you're adding interfacing. That can interfere with the process, and you should just put your iron flat down and then lift it off. You shouldn't rub it around, otherwise it might distort the fabric. Now, in step 26, it asks us to either create the eyelet and put the eyelets in as per your manufacturer's instructions, or do your little buttonhole, which should only be 1 centimetre, 10 millimetres long. I'm going to be installing eyelets next, and I'm going to use our little prim tool that we've got here. Do find that really helpful. So I'm going to create the holes first, and then I'm going to put the little bits of hardware onto the garment. So just using this little prim tool, I've annotated where I need my holes to be, and I'm just going to very carefully make these little holes here. And so we've got 2 nice little holes right there and there. So then I'm going to switch over the attachments that go into the prim tool and just put the correct ones in for the eyelets. So this one is the one that I want to be on the outside, and this is the one that I want to be on the inside of the garment. Lovely. So then I'm just going to push one of them through from the front to the back. You want that hole to be like as small as possible, so it's as tight as possible really, for these to be installed really nicely and neatly. So that's now through on that side, and it's pushed through the hole. So I'm just going to then attach the top bit to the bottom bit, and then just repeat for the other side. Wonderful. So on the front it's looking like that, and then on the back we've got it looking like that. Once you've done the eyelets, just press that casing down so it's touching the trouser leg. In step 28, we're going to thread our drawstring through and around our casing. We're doing it this way rather than sewing the casing down to create a complete loop and then sort of threading the drawstring through, simply because if you have done eyelets, it's really hard to get a safety pin through an eyelet to then retrospectively thread your drawstring through and around the casing. However, if you have done buttonholes, you're very welcome just to sew your casing completely and then, thread your drawstring through the buttonholes and around, because that will work much easier. Also, if you've chosen to hack the pattern and just put elastic into your waistband, now is the time to measure and cut out your elastic, and then you're going to sew the casing, leaving a small gap to be able to thread your elastic through, rather than do what I'm going to do next, okay? So for us, we're going to grab our drawstring, and working from the back to the front, we're just going to thread the one end of the drawstring through one of the eyelet holes, and then wrap the other end of the drawstring all the way round so that it's kind of going around the perimeter of the waist, and then thread the other end through the other little eyelet and just pull it through. Now then, at this point, I'd recommend just getting those 2 ends and just looping them together in a nice little knot like that so they don't pull out. Okay, and basically what we want to do now is we want to grab our pins, and we just want to make sure that our drawstring is staying tucked underneath the casing. We want to push our casing down and pin it to the trouser leg. Just keep tucking that drawstring under as you're pinning the casing down, and then just continue all the way around the casing. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're just going to sew the casing down to create and encase that drawstring into the casing. We want our line of stitching to be 25 millimeters from the waistband seam, which is this top seam up here. So effectively it's going to be 5 millimeters from your overlocked or your finished edges over here of the casing. So for me, I'm just going to use the inner line of stitches of my overlocking stitch as a guide for where I want to sew. Now you may find using a zipper foot is helpful, especially when you're going close to the eyelets and sewing close to the eyelets. However, it's completely up to you, so however you want to. Lovely. So, okay, so our drawstring is now completely encased. And step 31 says that we can now attach our ends to our drawstrings, or you can just tie a nice little knot in them too. It's completely up to you. So all I'm doing is just pushing through the cord into the end stop. Obviously you may have a completely different end stop to me, or you may just be tying a nice little knot. And then once it comes through the other end, for me and mine, all I'm going to do is just turn it over and then just sew that end in place. Now, you may well be able to just do like a little knot at the end of yours, and it will sit in nice and straight into the end of your loop, and that's absolutely great, end of your drawstring end. Okay, and there you have it, two really cute, nice little ends to your drawstring. Okay, step 32, we are going to hem our sleeves next. So we're going to turn the hem under 1.5 centimetres, press that, and then turn it under another 1.5 centimetres and press it again, so we've got a nice folded edge as part of our hem. Now you can top stitch your sleeve using a nice little twin needle like this one right here, or as I've done here on this demo, I've just done a straight line, like a large line of top stitching stretch stitches. So either is really nice and works really well. You can just choose whichever aesthetic you prefer. I'm actually currently really loving this look. So with the sleeve, I've just used hemming tape to hem it all down nice and firmly. Now I'm just going to sew it about 12 millimeters from the folded edge here. Brilliant. Once you've done one sleeve hem, let's just go and repeat that process for the other sleeve hem. Okay, at this point in the sew along, I'm actually going to show you how to sew sleeve C and how to finish the cuff of sleeve C, because for some of you at home, that's going to be the sleeve that you've picked. I'm going to be using a different coloured fabric, so it's really clear that this is a bit of an insert and it's not part of my purple jumpsuit, which is short sleeved. So if you're doing view C, follow along for the next few steps. And if not, then just skip to step 40, which is where we're going to hem the trousers. Okay, so I've got my sleeve piece here, which is the longer straight sleeve. I've already sewn it down at the side seam, so it makes one continuous loop. I've obviously not attached it to the rest of the body because I'm not sewing the full sleeve version for this particular jumpsuit. So this is just a little demo. So we've got that there, and then we've got the Rydal jumpsuit sleeve cuff, which is for the sleeve view C, with two little notches on either side. So as you can see, those notches are there and there. The first thing we're going to do, step 33, is actually fold it with right sides together so that those notches align. Pin in place and then stitch together to make a nice long tube. Then just trim that seam allowance in half, and then we just want to press that seam open so it's nice and flat. Next, we're going to fold it back on itself in half so that the wrong sides are together and the right side is facing out for both little cuffs. Then just line up those raw edges so they're really nice and neat. And so the raw edges are completely aligned. And then just press that whole cuff in place so it's going to stay in place when you attach it to the sleeve. Obviously, if you're doing two cuffs, just repeat that process for the other cuff at this stage. Okay, so ultimately what we're wanting is for this little cuff here to sit inside of the sleeve end of the sleeve piece here. So you'll notice that our sleeve cuff is significantly shorter than this. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to prepare some gathers around the perimeter of the base of the sleeve here. So it can then gather in and scrunch in to create a really nice little elegant bit of volume to the end of the sleeve. So what we're going to do is to run two lines of gathering stitches. So the gathering stitches are long stitch length, so 4.5, 5mm long stitch length. And we're going to run the first line of stitches 5mm from the raw edge, and then the second line of stitches 1 centimetre or 10 mil from the raw edge. So then you've got two parallel lines of stitches going all the way around the circumference at the end of the sleeve, but they are nice long stitches and they are within the seam allowance. so that we won't see them once we've actually sewn our gathers. Now, I would also recommend reinforcing your stitch line at the beginning of the stitch line, sewing all the way around and then just leaving a nice long piece of thread at the end, which you can use to pull and gather your stitches. Okay, great. So we've got a nice long line of gathering stitches, 2 long lines of gathering stitches, and we can just pull on 2 of the ones on the outside, so the 2 long threads on the outside. I tend to just tie them together so I don't lose track of which is which. And then you can just start to gently sort of pull those gathering stitches. So just, you don't need to pull too much to start off with, just give them a nice little pull in place, and then just distribute those gathers reasonably evenly around, just to get us started. Okay, that's not looking too bad. Now what we want to do is to get the cuff, and we want the raw ends of the cuff to be aligned with the raw end of the sleeve. So, and the other thing we want to align is this seam allowance here, and that seam there should be aligned with the seam on the inside of the sleeve. So with right sides together, we're just going to pop that inside the sleeve cuff and just align those 2 seams beautifully and pop a pin in place at that point. Then we're just going to continue to gather the sleeve, the base of the sleeve, until it is approximately the same size as the cuff. Once you're happy with the length, just tie a little knot onto the end of your thread, so as close as you can to the fabric, so that it holds it all in place and doesn't extend or expand as you continue to sew. Okay, so now just distribute those gathers really evenly. Now you've got the length of the end of the sleeve correct. Excellent. And then just with all 3 of those raw edges aligned, just pin in place. Now you're probably going to want to pin quite a lot of pins here because it's quite fiddly sewing, especially as it goes through your machine in a minute. Okay, so once you've pinned it all in place, just sew using your standard 1.5cm seam allowance and your stretchy stitch type. Don't forget to change your sewing machine settings at this point if you've not already done that, back to your stretchy stitch. Now, at this point, you should have 3 lines of stitches. You should have 2 lines of basting stitches and then 1 sort of stretchy stitch down here. What I'm going to do now is actually just snip out and cut off, you could use your unpickers for this, the basting line of stitches. And the reason I'm going to do that is simply because I want the sleeve still to be able to stretch as I wear it, and the cuff to be able to stretch over my wrist. And those straight basting stitches may cause a little bit of tension and not allow the cuff just to stretch fully. So complete that for the entire perimeter. And then once you've done that and that's finished, just overlock it to give it a nice, neat finish. Or just finish the seam allowance however you'd prefer. Lovely. Okay, great. Wow. So once you've done that, then just turn it right side out and just press that seam allowance up so that it creates a really lovely finish. I think that's just the proportion of that I absolutely love. And yeah, looking really good there. Great, okay, so now let's just go and try on our jumpsuit. Check you're happy with the hem length for the trousers. Don't forget that when you try them on, you're going to be reducing the hem and raising it up by 3 centimetres or 30mm. So just bear that in mind as you look at it. Once you're happy with the length and you decided on the hem length that you want for your trousers, let's just then repeat the whole process of hemming our trouser legs in the same way as we did our sleeves. So very simply, we are just going to turn the trouser legs under by 1.5 centimetres and then under again by another 1.5 centimetres so that we've got a nice rolled edge at the top of the hem there. So go away to your ironing board, do that, and then we'll sew it together. Okay, so again, I've just used hemming tape to turn and roll my trousers under and under again, and now I'm just going to stitch it in place. And my stitch line is going to be 12mm again from the folded edge. So it's just going to be just catching the edge of the hem that's been rolled under. And of course, once you've done one leg, just repeat for the other leg. Brilliant. So that's it. We have hemmed our trousers. We've sewn the whole thing. Amazing. Let's go and take a look and see what it looks like. So here we have it, completely done. Guys, I absolutely love this so much. The fabric is like a viscose jersey and it just is sitting so nicely. The fit across the bust is really nice, and around the waist it's just sort of gathered in really nicely and elegantly. I absolutely love it. Check out the back, the sides, sleeves are looking nice. The neckline is just sitting so nicely, and the sleeves just look great within this 3/4 length as well. A really comfy fit around the bust, but it's nice and snug, and it's just going to stay in place beautifully. The waist has just loads of ease in it, so I really love how it sort of gathers in at that point. And our lovely little drawstring is really cute too, just works really well. I love how that hardware just sort of elevates the pattern, just makes it feel a little bit more kind of professional. And then pockets, oh my gosh, love them. Did I mention that these have been designed to fit your phone into them comfortably, although it will obviously drag down. And they just give a nice bit of shape. I think they work really well on patterned fabric. And the length of these is just perfect for the summer. So thank you so much for following along today with me in this little sew along. I do hope you found that really helpful. All of our other patterns, our Dovestone and our Rivlin dress, they both have sew alongs as well. So if you've enjoyed sewing this one with me today, feel free to go and take a look at our other two patterns. They are done in a similar style with a supporting sew along. So guys, have fun styling your amazing Rydal jumpsuit.